Trump's calling Dick Cheney a rhino. I'm like, the Dick Cheney is like, if anyone's not a rhino, it's the Cheney family. It's a remarkable moment that we're in, that someone like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney cross party lines, endorse the Democrat for president, and still people are like, yeah, but is it going to reach voters?
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Shana Tova to our Jewish listeners and to the Gentiles whose kids are off school today because it's a Jewish holiday like mine. I'm here today with Kaitlan Collins. You might know her. Anchor at The Source on CNN, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on weeknights. You can watch that unless I'm on with Alex Wagner. What's happening, Kaitlan?
No, you could still watch. Just like put them both on.
DVR, picture in picture.
How are we?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. First time.
Can I tell you, everyone keeps saying to me, like, you only have 30 more days until the election. Like, you can do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sad about that because I feel the election slipping through my fingers and I love the election and I don't actually want it to be over. And
Same.
I think I'm like the only person who feels that way.
No, you and I are together. We're cosmic allies on this because I like it when people say it to me, that I get a feeling in the pit of my stomach. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this podcast in December with either Donald Trump going to be the president again or when it's like kind of boring coconut time. I'm like, anyway, I don't know. I like the rush. I'm with you.
Yeah, but I think either way, it's still going to be fun. Like regardless,
sure.
Like from a news perspective, regardless of who wins, obviously it's going to be super interesting. I think if Harris wins, like, you know, who she puts in her cabinet, if we have a Republican Senate, like there's still so much potentially interesting stories to come that I don't think it'll be over after
That
November.
is true. That makes me feel better. The Republican Party infighting, Donald Trump trials, maybe. Speaking of which, we have news on this front. It's our first Donald Trump trial news in a while. Tanya Chutkan unsealed Jack Smith's 165-page brief that outlined his strategy for prosecuting the January 6th case against Trump. The Pence stuff was what really jumped out to me. What jumped out to you?
So I think just reading this as someone who, one, lived this as a White House reporter, two, obviously covered the indictment last year very closely, still reading this, there's new things in here. And it does give us, you know, the biggest and maybe most comprehensive picture of that time period and what Jack Smith would argue in court. He may never get the chance to do so. So when I was reading it last night, that's what I was thinking is, you know, this is what we would see at trial, that the trial that may never happen if Trump wins. Obviously, it's definitely not happening in the next 32 days. And so reading that, you know, and I remember that day, and it's easy to think back now and you're like, yeah, we know this because we've seen the congressional testimony. I remember that day as all of this was happening, I got a call from someone.
Where were you?
I was at the White House and watching it all unfold. And I got a call from someone who had been a longtime source of mine, very close to Trump, very like not one of those people who like shit talk Trump behind the scenes, very much someone who was a believer. And they said, I just got off the phone with him and he sounds giddy. And I was like, that's impossible. Like, look at what's happening right now. This is insane. And they were like, no, he sounds almost happy about it. And so we reported that on air. And so to read this aide who rushed in, I think it's Nick Luna, but I'm not 100% sure, who rushed in to tell
What was Nick
Trump,
Luna's job for people who are not deep in the Kremlinology of the White House crowd?
He was basically an assistant to the president and ran Oval Office, not operations exactly, because that was Madeleine Westerhout, but he was essentially always there with Trump.
Like Cassidy level kind of.
Yeah, to help with like logistics, who's coming in, who's going out kind of thing. And to read that this person rushed in and testified to the grand jury that they told Trump Pence has to be evacuated to somewhere secure because he's not safe, in part because of what you've been tweeting and saying and your supporters. And Trump just goes, so what?
Yeah. I mean, those things kind of go together, right? The fact that he didn't care about Mike Pence and also that he liked it. I mean, this is like, if you're a megalomaniac and all you want is attention and you have like a black hole in your heart and there's like thousands of people like waving your flags and storming a Capitol, shouting your name, it's got to be about as close as you can get to like fulfilling your megalomaniacal desires. You know, I'm not a psychologist, but there's got to be something to that.
And this was someone who, you know, for 2 months had been saying, I won the election. No, I won the election. Being told by the White House counsel, the attorney general, all these people around him, no, you didn't. And, you got to let this go. And finally, he had this crowd of people who were on his side, who agreed with him. And obviously, if you've ever been to a Donald Trump rally, you see how much he feeds off of that. And yeah, I think that was it. He was so happy to see people who were as angry about the election as he was and didn't care about the truth as much as he didn't either, and were willing to push the boundaries on that and acting it out. So reading this, I found it really fascinating just because it reads almost like a novel. And I asked one of our attorneys that we had on set last night when we were off camera, I was like, how do you think Jack Smith feels? That they did all this work on this investigation. They've interviewed all these people, Mark Meadows, Mike Pence, like top people. And some of this stuff may never see the light of day beyond court filings that people like you and me are reading.
What did he say? How did he think Jack Smith feels about that?
This person didn't know. I was
right.
That's just what I was
crazy.
Curious about is like the Jack Smith team, like, the people who worked on the classified documents investigation obviously disbanded after it was dismissed. And to think that you put so much effort into something so serious as prosecuting a former president, and then because of what happened with Judge Cannon, or because of just how this worked out with the Supreme Court, it may never even go to court.
I hope you get the Jack Smith interview so we get to learn about that at some point.
Can we manifest that? Because I would love if Jack Smith, if you're listening, 9:00 on CNN is waiting for you.
Hey, Jim. Jim Comey listens. Hey, Jim, maybe you can tell Jack to do it. You know who else I found out listens recently? We should say hello to Jeff Clark. Jeff Clark listens to this podcast to see what the enemies are thinking. So, hello, Jeff. I do think you should probably be in jail, but I appreciate the download. Support our sponsors. The other thing that jumped out to me was...
I'm not going to comment on that because Jeff Clark will tweet at me.
Okay, yeah. Smart. The other thing that jumped out to me was that Jack Smith has the forensic data on Trump's phone. Did you see this?
Yeah.
So the forensic data on the phone, he was on his Twitter app watching Fox. So I guess he had a multi-screen thing because he's in the dining room. He's got the Super TiVo on. He's got his Twitter app on. He's watching Fox. At the time, they checked at Fox's interviewing a man who says that he's frustrated that Pence was not blocking the certification. And then Fox had reported that a police officer may have been injured. So Trump obviously hears this information. And that is when he sends the 224 tweet, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country. Like we kind of knew the general sense of that, but I don't know. I found that was interesting, like how deep like the prosecutorial team is on Trump's devices.
Yeah, because it really paints a picture of just what exactly that day looked like. It's the January 6th Congressional Committee. There was like this black hole that they kind of talked about, that period of time where Trump was doing nothing. And very few people actually were talking to Trump in this time. Lawmakers were calling him, but they're all, sheltering in place on Capitol Hill. And there were a lot of White House aides who were told to stay home that day. So there's this very small group of people who were actually in the West Wing, and a smaller group who actually wanted to be around Trump. I was texting people in the White House that day who were like, and I was like, what is he doing? What is he saying? And they're like, I'm not going anywhere near him. Like people were going out of their way to avoid him or avoid the Oval Office because he was so angry that day that they just didn't want to be around him. And so to read, he's got Twitter open, he's watching TV. For those who don't know, it's the Oval Office, and he has this small dining room right off of it. Trump actually spent most of his time there than actually in the Oval Office. It's like just a little more private.
In a dining room, kind of too.
Yeah,
it's small, right? Like it's
like very small, but that's where he had his TVs. He did a lot of meetings in there, and that's where he was sitting, just watching all of this play out for so long. And people outside were kind of fretting, how do we get him to say something, to stop, to back off of this? And it's remarkable just to read that and to get the details of what, to think if this went to trial and that an FBI agent would be on the stand testifying about what Trump was doing on Twitter, which we know only Trump and Dan Scavino had access to his Twitter, it's just remarkable to think if that actually happened in court.
God willing. The only other thing that jumps out to me, or not the only other thing, one of the other things that jumped out to me was the Sidney Powell section where Trump is muting the phone and making fun of her and calling her crazy to people. I just, it doesn't, like, getting into the Trump mindset. Did he really believe it? Was he deluded? Did he kind of know that he was lying about the election? I think all of that's kind of silly because, like, functionally it doesn't really matter, but it is interesting, right? Like, that he wasn't so crazed that, like, he had fully bought into the Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, like the bamboo ballots and the Chinese are in the computers and all this sort of stuff. Like, he felt enough to be able to be like, no, this is a crazy person, but I'm going to go along with it.
And Trump is such an appearance-focused person that when he sees a press conference that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell do where they seem crazy, where Rudy Giuliani has the hair dye streaking down his face, Sidney Powell is going on at length about Star Wars references. Trump's watching that like, what? Trump very much likes a central casting kind of figure. He wants someone who has like the gravitas and looks like they're coming out and the, sheen of legitimacy. And so to see that for him, it did show you what he was actually thinking behind the scenes. But because he didn't care how, crazy these people seemed, because they were saying what he wanted to hear, he was listening to them and not the actual person who was paid to be his White House attorney, Pat Cipollone. And the crazy thing that stood out to me, I had a conversation with Tom Emmer last night, the Republican whip in the House. And he was saying, why are we talking about this? This is 4 years ago, Kaitlan. Only the media cares about this, which one, Trump had posted on Truth Social about it 10 minutes before, so Trump cares about it. Two, when you read through this filing, everything that Trump was doing then, not saying in the months leading up that he would accept the results of the election, sowing doubt about mail-in ballots, saying the only way we can lose is if there's cheating, and saying, it's ridiculous, we won't know on election night who won. He's saying all of those things now, 4 years later. I mean, you could cut the dates out and paste in 2024. He's saying all of that on the campaign trail this time around.
Yeah, and planning to pardon the people that are in jail as a result of it. So it is a forward-looking element to it. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Also related to January 6th, so we have today on the campaign trail, Kamala Harris is with Liz Cheney for the first time. I think there were some questions about whether Liz was going to kind of campaign with her or just do her own thing separately. They're at the birthplace of the Republican Party in Ripon, Wisconsin, for the event. You're from Alabama. We're going to do a little SEC shit talk at the end. I have the conservative media background. Like, it is kind of it is. I mean, here we are, like you and me, was an RNC spokesman. Liz Cheney's with Kamala today. It's at the birthplace of the Republican Party. And yet, like, are there people that are breakthroughable, I guess? Is breakthroughable a word? Are there people that can be reached, like, with this today? Or, like, what? I mean, on one hand, it's kind of remarkable. And on the other hand, I don't know. What do you think?
If I had told you 6 years ago that Liz Cheney would be campaigning with Kamala Harris in Wisconsin in the lead up to the 2024 election, you would have had me checked out or sent to a psych ward, because it's it's just that. I mean, and now this just speaks to how we are so inured to what happens in the news cycle now. A Jack Smith filing comes out like this, and 24 hours later, Liz Cheney, obviously this is just completely random timing. She didn't know that this filing was going to come out, is with Harris in Wisconsin. It's just remarkable to see them side by side tonight will be stunning. And I felt this way when Dick Cheney came out and endorsed Harris, and Republicans were downplaying it, saying of course he is. Trump's calling Dick Cheney a rhino. Yeah. I'm the Dick Cheney is if anyone's not a rhino, it's the Cheney family. And I mean, it was just, it's a remarkable moment that we're in, that someone like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney cross party lines, endorse the Democrat for president, and still people are yeah, but is it going to reach voters? I mean, it's just a remarkable thing. And so I don't know if it changes anyone's mind. I do think there's the slice of the electorate that's undecided. I don't know how high information of voters they are, if they're listening to your podcast, if they're watching my show. These are people who, are working 9 to 5 jobs and taking their kids to practice after school. And so I don't know. I think that's a really good question of how this resonates with voters in a month from now. Yeah. But for historical perspective, it's wild to see this.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any like Trump voters that are flipping over this, right? Like my question is like, to me, the Liz Cheney job, and I do this on every podcast, so we don't need to begrudge it, but just do it over and over again. But if new people came out, and you please should, Chris Christie, Mark Esper, et cetera, like is to nudge people that are not Trump, that are college educated, mostly middle to high income, kind of Republicans that they've decided they're not going to vote for Trump. Like, can they be nudged over to Harris in the final 32 days to like act to affirmatively support her? These people exist. They do it. They exist in all of the swing states. They exist in Georgia. And I don't know. I mean, I think about like the Katie Britt, and Katie Britt is voting for Trump. Obviously, she wanted to be his VP, but like that type of person, like that archetype, is there a person like that lives in Wisconsin that is gettable? I don't know. What say you?
The Katie Britt story itself is fascinating if we want to talk about that. But on this, I talked to Jeff Flake, who came out and endorsed Harris. Yeah. Lifelong conservative, represented Arizona in Congress for 20 years. And then, of course, not a surprise because he went to serve as Biden's ambassador to Turkey. But he came out and he was saying, and he wasn't directing this very obviously towards the Mitt Romneys of the world, but he kind of was in the sense of he was saying, you don't get to just not say, hey, I'm not voting for Trump, but I'm also not voting for Harris. He was essentially arguing that it's a protest vote and that it doesn't really make a big difference in his view. Yeah. That if you're not voting for Trump, he argued you have to vote for Harris because it's two choices and that's where your difference is going to be made. And you're kind of, when people like Jeff Flake do it, it does create a permission structure, I think, for those people that you were just referencing in that kind of piece of, well, I don't like him, but I also don't love her. So why would I vote for her? Jeff Flake is saying, because you don't want him to be president again.
You piqued my interest. I mean, I obviously really agree with Jeff Flake on that, and I think that I do think these people are still out there and are gettable and are nudgeable still in the last 30 days, and I'm happy that Liz Cheney's out there doing it. What was? But you've piqued my interest on the Katie Britt story. Tell me about your insight.
Well, obviously, I'm from Alabama, and I tracked that Senate race so closely. And when she was running, there were several Republicans running for the nomination after Richard Shelby said he wasn't going to run again. She's his longtime chief of staff. She kind of seemed like this heir apparent for this role in the sense of, she knew the Chamber of Commerce. She lived and grown up in Alabama. Her husband played football for Alabama. They're just kind of like this, it seemed like the stereotype of what the next Senate candidate from Alabama would look like. Enter Mo Brooks into the picture, who's also running against her, who gets Trump's endorsement. And everyone and Trump also trashed Katie Britt,
right?
Dismissing her as like an assistant or something, I think, even though she was a chief of staff to a very powerful senator. Trump holds a rally in Alabama and, everyone was kind of wondering, will Katie Britt show up to this given Trump has endorsed her opponent? She still showed up. And she was there. She was backstage, I think, with all the Republicans and who were there, talking to Trump, greeting him. And that is the rally where Mo Brooks gets on stage and kind of essentially argues we should move on from the 2024 election. Obviously, one of the most
2020 election.
Yeah, one of the most famous speakers at the Ellipse on January 6th. And the crowd kind of booed a little. And Trump, listening backstage, was furious. And ever since then, Trump had turned on him. But there was just a long period where it seemed like Katie Britt had no hope because Trump was backing somebody and it was very powerful. And she survived that and ended up becoming the nominee and obviously winning that seat.
Like this person, we know Katie Britt. I feel like especially able to talk about Katie Britt because she's an archetype. I mean, and she was a valedictorian or class president or whatever it was, goes to DC, works on the Hill. Like this person is not MAGA, right? Like she's not in her, I guess, origin story. So the question is what of her? Does she just snap back in a future world if Kamala Harris wins this time? Or has she embraced it? What you hang out with some of these people? Have they been MAGA-pilled? What do you think?
I asked a Republican senator recently if they thought it would actually be better for their party overall if Trump lost.
Yeah.
And because then it would open up the 2028 field for all these young Republicans that we know are dying to run for president, but just didn't have any space to do that with a Trump Trump in the party or at the top of the party. And I think that's an interesting conversation with people like Senator Katie Britt.
What did they say? The senator.
They kind of said maybe. They didn't really fully know, but they didn't say no. They were like, we want Donald Trump to win.
Right. Yeah.
Because obviously these are people who are politicians and they're calculated and they're, watching the way the wind is blowing like everyone else. I think Senator Katie Britt she's really savvy and she's really smart and she's very young. And, people realize what happens to people who don't subscribe to the MAGA part of the party, which is now the whole party, basically.
Right.
And I think that they're just, being strategic.
Strategic is a nice way to put it. Okay. So, Liz, the Kamala Harris is trying to reach these voters, these college-educated, the Katie Britt types that haven't gone full MAGA in Wisconsin. Donald Trump put out a video. It's a different kind of strategy. Let's listen to it.
And on June 14th, 1946, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God gave us Trump. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, fix this country, work all day, fight the Marxists, eat supper, then go to the Oval Office and stay past midnight at a meeting of the heads of state. So God made Trump. I need somebody with arms, strong enough to rustle the deep state, and yet gentle enough to deliver his own grandchild. Somebody to ruffle the feathers, tame cantankerous World Economic Forum, come home hungry, have to wait until the First Lady is done with lunch with friends, then tell the ladies to be sure and come back real soon.
What the fuck is that?
I don't remember. I went to church every Sunday growing up. Obviously being from the South, I don't remember reading about the deep state in the Old Testament.
No,
but maybe I'm wrong.
The arms. Is there not though? Is there not a couple people in that church that are like, this feels wrong? Like this feels a little wrong. I mean, I was Catholic growing up, so we had saints. So there's certain that you honor certain people for their traits. But the traits of coming home hungry and waiting for the ladies to make you lunch, I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't heard that, but it was actually really funny. The deep state is really what killed me. I don't think God was thinking about the deep state when he was creating the world, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think that you're right on that. Hey, y'all, before I started taping a daily morning podcast, in the evening sometime I go for a glass of wine or a couple of bourbons. But I got tired of all those calories, feeling sluggish in the morning, bloated face that I can see on the YouTube. It just doesn't cut it anymore. And that's why we're turning to Soul's new out-of-office THC gummies, perfectly microdosed to get you blissed, but not blitzed. This podcast is sponsored by Soul. Soul's new out-of-office gummies, out-of-office, keyword there, are perfectly microdosed with hemp-derived THC and CBD to give any day that chilling on the beach vibe. Thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill, Soul can send you THC products no matter where you live in the United States. The out-of-office gummies help give you that much-needed me time at the end of the day. They're convenient and delicious. As I was saying at the top, the hangovers aren't really working for me anymore. When you just have the 2 beer hangovers, that is. If you want to go out on the weekend, that's something. We got another sponsor for that. But on the weeknights, I got to keep sharp for y'all. I got to keep sharp for Kaitlan Collins. Okay. And so, maybe one little microdose gummy is the right solution. Allows you to watch that Donald Trump late night event without spiraling into a fit of rage. And Soul is the way to go. Soul was founded 5 years ago by brother and sister duo, Mike and Angie Lee. Mike's a former boxer, and Angie's an author and professional speaker. They wanted to create natural alternatives to medication that tackle problems they deal with themselves: sleeplessness, anxiety, focus, and pain. And Soul's products are grown right here in the USA, organically farmed. So give Soul a try. Head to getsoul.com and use code THEBULWARK for 30% off your order. That's 30% off your order using code THEBULWARK. One last time, getsoul.com and code THEBULWARK for 30% off. Here's the thing. You get these questions. It's like, Kaitlan, I get these as well. Tim and Kaitlan, help us translate. Why do the red state people like Donald Trump. What is it? And you get that, and I think that you handle it capably. You can't put yourself in their head. But there was somebody that was kind of upset with the way that you speak on behalf of Alabama, and I want to listen to that really quick too.
The fact that she has some roots in Alabama does not make her a fair and balanced reporter.
No.
I will submit to the record, her biggest sin is not that she is biased, though she is. It's that she's boring. She's extremely boring with no personality. I have a pro tip for her. Smile. Try smiling every once in a while. Try not to be, like, in your delivery, such a cold-hearted all the time.
Feels like kind of a she who smelt it dealt it situation on that accusation from Megyn Kelly, but I was wondering what you made of that.
I mean, I really can't. I don't have anything on that.
You're smiling, I see, though. I do see that you're capable of smiling, it seems like. I don't know. What is happening there?
I mean, I got nothing.
You got nothing? Jealousy? Did you ever hang out with Megyn? Have you met?
I've never met Megyn Kelly. I used to watch her when she had her show in primetime on Fox, and I thought it was interesting. We listen to her interviews and stuff. I don't know. It was a really strong opinion, but I won't feel singled out because I think that next week she went after Taylor Swift and was like, F you, Taylor Swift. And I don't know.
The CBS moderators also.
The CBS moderators.
She said F you to the CBS moderators as well.
Yeah.
Very
and also,
angry.
I think the idea, actually not even the last part of that,
just Alabama.
I guess there's nothing to call me because I really am not biased and I do work really hard at my job. So I think if the worst thing someone calls me is a cold-hearted bitch, I'll take it. But saying I have some roots in Alabama is so funny to me personally as someone who is just home this weekend. My entire family lives in Alabama still. I grew up in Alabama, obviously, went to school there. I'm like a rabid Alabama fan. And it like totally shaped who I am today. And so to hear some roots is like I have a cousin who lives there or something that I'm like clinging to is quite funny.
I know it killed me to watch Alabama come back to beat Georgia last weekend, knowing that we were going to be on this week. I was so excited to trash talk you. After Georgia came back, I was so excited. I was watching the sad Alabama fans. After that, you were there?
I just got my voice back because I was so hoarse. Like, I don't normally scream at the games. I try to be pretty chill. But I was like, that game really took 10 years off my life. And it was one of the best games I've ever been to. And I've been to a million college football games. And it was just so fun. I'm still on a high from that win. But to the question that you said you get from people who ask, why do people in red states love Trump so much?
Yeah.
Obviously, we covered extensively what Trump said at the debate with Harris about Haitian migrants eating dogs. Not true. Obviously, we've gone over that a million times with JD Vance and everybody. But racist, just to give people 100%,
not true. Yeah.
100%. And the people are here, those Haitians are here legally as well. And so, but just to give people a sense of how other people view that who aren't in our environment or who aren't offended by that. Obviously, the Crimson Tide was playing the Georgia Bulldogs, and every single person, almost to a T, in Tuscaloosa on Saturday was wearing a button that was a Trump, and it said they're eating the dogs, DAWGS. They thought it was funny. Like they're not offended by things like that, and they found it comical.
Do you feel like I feel this way? I do. I quiz. I like. Generally try not to like quiz strangers about politics on the street when I'm in Louisiana because this is my escape from politics. But I feel obligated to do it at LSU tailgate just because like as a cultural as just getting hearing from people that are outside my little bubble. And it's like, do you feel that way? Like, do hearing from cousins or old friends or stuff? Like, does it give you a perspective on things that like maybe other CNN folks don't get? Like, is there anything that's jumped out at you recently to that effect?
And I feel like my whole life is, people always say, oh, I don't want to talk to you about work, but I'm like, my whole life is talking about politics. Right. I feel like, and so I definitely want to talk to people in, Montgomery and Tuscaloosa or Georgia, wherever you're going about it. And so, yeah, I also do think it gives me a way better understanding because I'm related to Trump voters. I spend Christmas with Trump voters. I spend Thanksgiving with them. I buy them birthday gifts. Like, I talk to them all the time. And so I feel like I have a different understanding of it. And this is less so now, but I think really in 2016 when Trump was, taking his iron grip or on the Republican Party, I got it because I was like related to these people and I knew that they weren't racist or horrible or misogynist, yet they were still supporting Trump. And so it was an understanding of Trump voters that I think was actually really helpful to me as a reporter in covering him and kind of understanding. Also working at the Daily Caller, I would argue helped with that because it's obviously a conservative outlet. And I started there before Trump even was a thing. And then when Trump ran, I watched kind of from my vantage point as Trump rose to power. But initially, conservatives thought he was a joke too and thought that Ted Cruz or Scott Walker or someone was going to be the nominee.
Yeah.
So I watched that kind of evolution as well, which also I think made me a better White House reporter when I started covering him.
I do wonder about the Daily Caller thing because I don't know about you, but sometimes I put like the regular the non-political folks in my life in a different bucket than like the political professionals. And I think maybe vice versa. Right. And I do wonder, like, now having gone from the Daily Caller to CNN, I mean, like, there's got to be some former colleagues that are like, F you, and that you feel the same way, like looking back. I don't know. Is there tensions? And it just is such a changed world from the like 2016 Daily Caller life to being a CNN morning show anchor with Don Lemon. It is like, Do you guys still like get to talk, or like how was that transition?
Well, one, I would say a few things. The Daily Caller obviously has a lot of turnover in it, just because when I worked there, I was like 22 years old.
Right.
So it has a lot of young people who work there. So a lot of the people that I worked with have moved on from there as well, like the core group that I was, in the newsroom with, hanging out with. But I don't think so. Maybe there's someone who didn't like me that now doesn't like what I say or how I report or interview people. But there's definitely still some people from there who've moved on to other outlets that I've stayed in touch with who don't have animosity towards me or anything like that. I actually think they thought it was cool that I went to work at CNN and that someone from the Daily Caller could have the kind of trajectory that I had. And I also think when people say, I get this from the reverse, from conservative people who say, well, how could someone who works there go work at CNN? And I say, well, doesn't that say something about CNN, that they were willing to hire a Daily Caller reporter because they viewed me as a reporter and didn't think that I had like ideological leanings, which I don't. And I think it says a lot about both places, that people who were there when I came to CNN were happy for me, and that, people at CNN, like, that didn't stop them from hiring me. I think that says a lot about both of them.
Yeah, I guess. Don't you think, you don't need to pick on the Daily Caller in particular, but like, look, like there was at the time that you were there, like there was an aspiration, a Tucker stated aspiration that like he wanted it to be like the New York Times of the right, where they did legit reporting, and there was obviously some legit reporters there. Like over time, it feels like that aspiration, not just at that place, but like across conservative media, has fizzled a little bit. And like there are a few examples you could point to, but like, don't you feel like it's just a huge propaganda and media criticism operation? Like, rather than trying to create a second media that has the same, fact checking, accountability, etc., like they've just created like an opinion monster that just throws arrows at the media?
Well, I won't say this about them in particular, but
Sure.
but about conservative media overall. One, I think having smart editors and people who, for these young reporters who come in and need guidance or, instruction, I think that is crucial as you're learning how to be a reporter. That, that's what made a difference for me. And I think secondly, a lot of the coverage sometimes since Trump was in office became like anti-Trump coverage,
Right.
which I thought obviously is not, what initially is like what people set out to do. And I know a lot of people who are conservative reporters and will, talk about their ideological leanings. I think the Free Beacon has done some good reporting. I mean, they reported about Tim Walz and him saying he was in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square. They were one of the first people to raise questions about that, which was a question at the debate the other night for him. And he's since talked about it and addressed it and said that he misspoke about the dates. And so I think that there is good reporting out there, and I think that there should be critical reporting. If there's reporting from the left, there should be reporting from the right. I personally think that there should be more reporting that's just totally non-biased. But yeah.
Here's the problem with that, though. Like, look, you got K-File over there, and you got plenty of investigative reporters at CNN, and if they had the Tiananmen Square thing about Tim Walz fall in their lap, they would have gladly reported on it. It was the CBS
and they did good follow-up on it.
Yeah, it was a CBS reporter that asked him about it at the debate. If we won't pick on the Free Beacon, but if most of the people in conservative media had a JD Vance lie fall in their lap, are they reporting? Like, is there an example of that? Is there an example of a conservative outlet recently doing like an expose on Donald Trump or one of his minions? Like, I don't really think so.
Well, and that's a good point in the sense of if you're going to do it to one side, you should do it freely to either side. You don't just pick one and then, stick on that. I think that's a really good point.
We were talking before you came on. So these guys, I think we're kind of learning a little bit from in this interview, but why they do, you give them the business when they go on CNN. These guys I've asked every Republican member of Congress to come on this podcast. We just made some interns send an email out to all of them. Not an intern, actually. I'm sorry, Tony. That was rude to you. You do great work.
Or Tony.
Strong. Tony is amazing, actually. I'm getting old. This is more of a comment on me that like a 28-year-old like professional, I'm like, you're an intern. This is more about my aging issues,
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. But none of them will come on. Nobody will come on. Spencer Cox will, because they know I'll just give them shit about Trump. But they do it with you, and you give them the business. Like, what do you think explains that? Is it something about like the CNN, like feeling like they have to do it with the platform? Is it the fact that is it Bama Rush talk? Are you charming them? Like, talk to me about booking these guys. Are they not? Why aren't they scared of you?
My Southern charm is what I'm utilizing. I don't know. If you ask Megyn Kelly, she probably would agree with that. But no, I don't know. I think it's that one, from being a reporter, I understand the importance of a relationship and establishing like trust with someone and credibility. People don't like what you're going to report all the time, but I think they'll know that you're going to give them a fair shot. And I think that's what we've tried to argue when we have people on the show. And sometimes people will just come on, but often, as anyone who's ever tried to book anyone knows, it takes a lot of work to get someone to come on. Yeah. And there's a few guests that I've really had a lot of conversations with behind the scenes before they finally agreed to do this show. And I think we do a few things, which is one, we're not I believe if you're inviting someone on, you should let them speak. Like, you're inviting someone on to hear from them. And
this is a problem that I have. Yeah, that's a good subtweet criticism of me right there.
Oh, It actually wasn't of you. I was just saying, like, I've seen interviews before where like the person gets cut off, and I just think, I want to hear from them.
Right.
You got to ask questions, and yes, you have to interject or point out when what they're saying is exaggerated or just not true. But I think we let people talk. And then also I think, we give people a fair shot. But it's also never going to be a walk in the park. I think I have found, these are lawmakers who are professionals at this, professional communicators. They like to be challenged. I don't think anyone wants to just come on and have like a really easy interview where they don't ever get to, they don't get pushed back or anything like that. And I think that's not just for Republicans, for Democrats too, and for administration officials as well. And so it's just a better conversation when you're kind of taking someone's conventional wisdom and poking holes in it or testing it and seeing, how far they can defend it. I think that's really interesting.
Do you get, again, just generalize, you don't need to pick on one of your interviewees, but like the MAGA, willingness to just kind of say day is night, like in these interviews, like does create a little bit of a different environment. I mean, I think that there are plenty of examples of Democrats who lie or exaggerate, or do the shit that I used to do when I was a spin meister, or spin or duck the question. But like some of these times with the Republican, I mean, obviously with the 2020 election stuff in particular, but other stuff, you come in and they're just like, no, like yes is like, and like, how do you think about dealing with like the potential difference there? Or maybe you don't agree that it's a difference.
No, I do think it's a difference because there's one thing where you're like, okay, I know that's your talking point, but then there's another one when they're just coming on and saying something that's flatly not true or just so wild. I think of this, we had Ralph Norman on, who is for those who don't know, a congressman from South Carolina. He was a rare Nikki Haley Republican backer, and he was one of our biggest surrogates. And obviously, that was kind of notable because he's pretty MAGA-ish.
He also spoke at the Ellipse, didn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. And so he was someone who he had done all these interviews pushing for Nikki Haley and advocating for her. And I was like, wasn't he the one who sent the text about martial law that was discovered by the congressional investigation? Yeah. So before we had him on, I looked it up, and he had sent a text saying Trump should declare martial law. And he was not getting asked about it, which I found kind of surprising, because I think obviously we get busy. It's the day-to-day of everything, but that's a huge thing to say the president should do after a fair election. So he talked about Nikki Haley, and then I asked him about the text, and his response, he said the only thing he regretted about that text was not saying that someone should declare martial law. It was that he misspelled Marshall. He spelled it like the name instead of Martial. And so there are moments like that where, I always appreciate an interview when I'm just totally taken by surprise. And that was one of those moments.
What did you follow up with on that? Just really? I feel like really is what would have been my follow-up question.
I think my face kind of said it all, but it was one of those moments where we were like, you really think he should have declared martial law after an election that clearly was completely legitimate? And he said, yes, totally stood by it.
It's just a little bit of an asymmetry. You're not going to have Chris Murphy on talking about, we wanted to have martial law,
Right. So it's just a different world, in some of these interviews. But I always find them really interesting, whether it's like our Bill Barr interview we had 2 really interesting interviews with him. I always appreciate an interview where someone's totally candid and forthcoming and isn't full of talking points. That's really an interview that I appreciate having the most, because I think that's what our audience finds to be the most interesting.
Same. And you're doing a good job with that. Okay, just really quick, 2 things. We got to go. But I meant to ask you in the Daily Caller on Tucker. Do you have any Tucker insights for us? Did you get to hang out with Tucker when you were there?
Tucker was running the Daily Caller when I was there. So he was my first boss for my first big real job. And that was when he was on Fox and Friends Weekend. And yeah.
But do you look at the Tucker stuff and say, oh, I know that guy, he just something a little different? Or do you look at him and be like, wow, what you put on a new skin face? Or what? Do you have any?
I don't have any insights into it. I think Tucker, I do. The one thing I get asked is people ask, does he really believe this? Is this just like an act? I think some people think it is. I think Tucker is totally genuine, and that is what he genuinely thinks. I think he says what he thinks.
He genuinely thinks we should be revisiting whether Churchill was the hero of World War II or not. Maybe generally he's just open to thinking about it. Genuinely just open to think about it. I don't know. The Tucker thing is an ongoing mystery. All right, final thing. You were on SNL this weekend?
Yes. Well, not me personally.
Did you know beforehand? Did you get a text from the actor?
No, I didn't know, because the Bama game had just ended, and we were still hanging out in the stadium and hadn't left, and my phone had 5% battery and started blowing up, which I thought it was about the Bama game. Yeah. It was not. It was about SNL, which was just really fun. And Chloe Fineman, I think, is amazing, and I thought that her eyebrows were great, which was a huge compliment.
You thought she nailed the eyebrows? Did she miss anything? Do you have any notes?
No notes.
No notes?
No notes.
Kaitlan Collins, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. After the election, since you and I will be the only people that are down, we should do it again, on the darkest day of the year in December, and kind of buck each other up and be like, there's still fun stuff to talk about. We'll still be good. We'll survive, right?
I'm totally here for that.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks to Kaitlan Collins. We'll be back tomorrow. We got a big one, a doubleheader. See y'all then. Peace.